Alright, today we're going to be talking about multiplication. The definition for multiplication is combining many groups of the same size and counting the result. Let's take the number problem 2,379 times 1,204. This is really 1,204 groups of 2,379. And we can also look at it like this. So if you take each of these circles as a group of 2,379, we have 1,000 groups, 200 groups, and 4 groups. We can break it up that way. And each of these groups contains 2,379. So for multiplication, we're first going to start with our 4 groups of 2379, because remember we're breaking it up into a group of 1,000, a group of 200, and a group of 4. So for our 4 groups of 2,379, we're going to multiply each value by 4 because we have 4 groups. So starting with our singles place, we're going to multiply our 9 value by 4. And this is going to give us 3 rods and 6 singles. Moving on to our rods, multiplying that by 4, we're going to get 2 flats and 8 rods. Moving on to our flats, we would get 1 cube and 2 flats. And then lastly, we're going to get 8 cubes. So add these all together, we end up getting 9 cubes. We get 5 flats, 1 rod, and 6 singles, because we added up our values, our like values. How that looks over here is, well, we know that 9 times 4, which is what we did right here, we get 36, and so we drop our 6 here, carry our 3 because it would then be a rod and need to be counted with the tens place. We move on to our 4 by 7, which is 28, but we have to add the 3, so we get 31. We drop our 1, which is really 310, but we drop our 1 and carry our 3. Move on to 4 times 3, which is 12. This is really 4 times 300, so that's 1,200 plus 3, which is really 300. We get 5, which is really 500. Carry the 1 to the thousands place. And then 4 times 2, or 4 times 2,000, which would be 8,000, plus that 1, or the 1,000, would leave you with 9,000. And that's our first part, where we focus on the 4 groups of 2,379. Alright, so next we're going to move on to 0 groups of 2,379. What's important about this is that it's really 0 supergroups of 10. But even though it's 0, we still are going to append a 0 right here because we are multiplying everything by 10. So this is really important for a placeholder. Nonetheless, we're still going to multiply everything by 0. I think we know what we're going to get for our answers. So, for 9 singles times 0, we're going to get 0 singles. For 7 rods times 0, we're going to get 0 rods. for 3 flats times 0, we're going to get 0 flats. And for 0 cubes, we're going, for 0 cubes, we're going to get 0 cubes. So add all of those up, and we get 0, 0, 0, and 0. Easy peasy. Let's move on to the next group. So now we're going to move on to our 200 groups of 2,379. And so because this is 200, this is 2 supergroups of 100. And so what's important is that we need to append 2 zeros right here for placeholders because we're multiplying everything by 100, essentially, or technically 200. So we're going to go through and we're going to multiply all our values by 2, which is really 200. And we get, multiply our singles by 2, we get 1 flat and 8 singles. Seven rods by 2, we get 1 flat and 4 rods. 3 flats by 2, we get 6 flats. And 2 cubes by 2, we get 4 cubes. So add all of our like values up and we get 4 cubes. We get 7 flats. 5 rods. And 8 singles. And over here, that we drop down our 8. Over 5. This is 7. And this is 4. So remember, everything moves over because we have 2 zeros here because we're really multiplying everything by 200. Finally, we're going to move on to our 1,000 groups of 2,379. And so we're going to focus on one. So what it's going to look like is that we're multiplying everything by 1, but we're really multiplying everything by 0 because we have 1 supergroups of 1,000. So what's important is that we need to append 3 zeros now for placeholders because, like I just said, we're multiplying all of our values by 1,000. So everything needs to move up 3 spaces. So let's do it. So 1 times 9 singles is going to leave you with 9 singles. 1 times 7 rods is going to leave you with 7 rods. 3 flats. And 2 cubes. And we don't really need to add anything together, and so we can just place our 9, our 7, our 3, and our 2. And so now what we do is we add all of our values together because we combined many groups of the same size, and now we need to count the result. And so 6 and 1, 5 plus 8 is 13. Carry the 1. That is going to leave you with 24. Carry the 2. 16. 8. And 2. So our final answer, after combining many groups of the same size, so our 1,204 groups of 2,379, and after counting the result, we get 2,864,316. So let's answer the question of why we bump it up. So why we add our zeros here, so we bump up the answer over here. Let's make that really clear. So let's look over here and see that we have our 2 cubes, our 3 flats, our 7 rods, and our 9 singles, which make up the number 2,379. Now let's say that you had 10 of all of them. So our 10 singles would combine to make 1 flat. Our 10 flats, or our 10 rods, sorry, so our 10 singles would combine to make 1 rod. Our 10 rods would combine to make 1 flat. Our 10 flats would combine to make 1 cube. And our 10 cubes would combine to make 1 supercube. So we bump it up because we're combining things by 10, which automatically combines it to a higher value. So our singles become rods, our rods become flats, our flats become cubes, and our cubes become supercubes. And that's why we append our zeros depending on what place we're multiplying it by. So let's go back. This is really 4 groups. We were multiplying this by our 4 groups of 2,379. This is really 0 groups. This is really, but it's still, so our 0 groups is still in the tens place. This is really 200 groups. And this is really 1,000. So that's why we move it up, because we're adding all these zeros or combining it by 10 so many times that we need to move up our place value. So overall, multiplication works because we can bring it back to the definition by reminding ourselves that we are combining many groups of the same size. So we were combining 1,204 groups of 2,379, and we counted the result, which gave us 2,864,316. And that is how multiplication works.